Guys, this is NBA Chase or Fade. So agree or disagree with the following DFS plays or bets on tonight's 3-game slate. It is a small 3-game NBA slate. So let's start by looking at the DFS side of tonight's game. So the two most expensive players on the slate are Kevin Durant at 11,600, who, by the way, just got ruled questionable, and Steph Curry at 11,500. So DK users are likely going to have to make this decision tonight. Are you going to chase one, fade the other? Perhaps you're taking this questionable ruling into consideration, Garion.
Yeah, I will say right off the top, I know it's not in the spirit of the game, but this is a slate where you really could start a lineup with Durant and Curry and just figure it out. There is so much value. We'll get to that in a second on this 3-gamer, just with the amount of guys who've been ruled out. But in a vacuum, if Durant actually ends up playing in this game, I think he's the better option. Even before we found out this morning that 4 more Nets were being added to the COVID protocols, including 2 starters on the wing in James Johnson and DeAndre Bembry. I mean, Durant's just playing so much for a guy who's just like 2 years removed from Achilles injury. In his last 9 games, he leads the NBA in minutes played, 39.8 per game. And he's averaging almost 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. So when someone's just logging that much volume and is still as hyper efficient as Durant is, I know the narrative is behind Curry tonight, but I do just think Durant's the better play if he actually ends up being active.
Nick F., do you agree with that?
I don't actually. I'm going to go with Steph Curry. And generally speaking, I'm going to lean Steph Curry over Kevin Durant as much as he's getting those minutes, just because I know Curry had a couple of games where he was a little bit off, but he's been very reliable this season from a scoring perspective when you look at his salary. And honestly, I looked at, the efficiency of these two teams. And I know the Raptors, not an immensely efficient team, but the Knicks are among the 10 least efficient teams on the defensive end this season. And Toronto also moves at a slower pace too. I know there's going to be more opportunities for Durant with guys out tonight. And again, he is in question. If Harden plays tonight, I still like Steph Curry in this one too, because the one thing about the Knicks, I know they're 11th best in terms of DK fantasy points allowed to opposing point guards this season, but they're 8th worst in points allowed to opposing point guards. And obviously that's where Curry, makes his money. And then you look at how Curry's done at the Garden throughout the course of his career too, very efficient shooting, both inside the arc and beyond. Obviously we're looking at beyond the arc more so with him. And then in terms of his, just counting stats, 25.9 points per game and 4.9 assist points per game at the Garden throughout his career.
All right, Nick W., what do you think? KD or Steph?
Well, I was prepared to make the case for KD. We'll see if he ends up playing in this game, with all the COVID issues in Brooklyn and apparently, this right ankle issue that he's dealing with. It wouldn't be shocking if they just kind of pack it in and say, all right, we're giving you the night off. And if we lose this one, so be it. But, I think if Durant plays, he's certainly the safer option. It gives you more diverse contributions, when you're talking rebounds, what he can do defensively. Steph right now, obviously more of an offensive focused player. And the points that Garion made, especially with if Durant plays, he really has no help on this roster outside of James Harden. And somewhat, that's been the case. That's kind of how this roster has been constructed from the start. But it's become even more extreme over the last few weeks. I think a lot of the guys that they thought they were going to get more contributions from, someone like a Blake Griffin, those just really haven't been there. So it's really been all Kevin Durant. And if he plays, I think that continues. The thing that worries me a little bit too with Curry is, obviously he's a great option, but I think he is pressing a little bit these last few games as he approaches the 3-point record. Chances are he smashes it early in the game and maybe things, kind of revert back to normal for him. But I think he's been pressing a little bit offensively in terms of shot selection. He has 2 games under 40 DraftKings points in his last 3. That's obviously uncharacteristic for Steph Curry. So maybe he gets the record out of the way and it's smooth sailing from there. But, I think we could see, at least a little bit of a different mindset for him to begin this game.
All right, Nick F., who are you chasing as a value play on this slate? Gary already mentioned, there's so much value here tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, the Nets game totally threw things off because I was looking more at the Phoenix-Portland game. But now I can't help but look at the Nets, and I think Cameron Thomas is one guy who comes to mind too, because if Kevin Durant does not play tonight, that is a guy who got a lot of minutes, a lot of opportunities when the Nets went up against the Rockets. Obviously, that game didn't go too well for the Nets, but for Thomas, it was a big opportunity. He still gets quite a bit of minutes, and that's a guy who I'd be leaning towards, even if we do see Kevin Durant play tonight, because there's just quite a few other guys who he would take minutes from. The other guy, when I was looking at the Phoenix-Portland game, was Larry Nance Jr. Obviously moved into the starting lineup the other night and thrived. And he has fresh legs. Phoenix is coming on is on the second leg of a back-to-back. If Ayton doesn't play too, obviously that makes a big difference in terms of size for Phoenix. And even still, if Ayton does play and he's limited in any capacity, they are going to be focused more on Nurkic. They've done well against him this season, and I think Larry Nance is going to get opportunities there. But I think that the Nets game is a place where you kind of look for that value too, just with all the concerns with illness.
All right, Nick W., where are you looking for value on the slate?
Yeah, I mean, the Nets are the obvious one at this point. No James Johnson, no Aldridge, no Carter, no Joe Harris, who's been injured, no Paul Millsap, no DeAndre Bembry. Some of those guys themselves, would normally be value plays on a slate like this. So we're digging even deeper now into that roster. I think Cam Thomas is going to be, really highly rostered on this slate at $4,000. He already had 20 plus DraftKings points in 4 of his last 5 games. So he's been on the radar already. And now you're pushing him into kind of an obvious, upping the usage situation tonight, especially if Durant doesn't play. Then he becomes extremely popular. I think Bruce Brown at 4,300 also makes a lot of sense. He should see a ton of minutes tonight. He has some more defensive upside than Cam Thomas, kind of the opposite player in a number of ways. Bruce Brown, also a very good rebounder for his size. And then like Nick F kind of touched on, if DeAndre Ayton doesn't play tonight, I think JaVale McGee, again, becomes a pretty obvious pivot. He's kind of been this year's like Hassan Whiteside in some ways, where like there are nights where he only plays like 14 minutes and can still give you 12 points and 2 blocks. And then all of a sudden when he's playing 28 minutes, those numbers prorate out and he could be really productive. So if we see Ayton sit again with that illness, I like JaVale McGee quite a bit at 4,200.
All right, Garion, you also looking here for some value?
You don't have to look very hard. Again, you could just look at center, like just centers below 5K. Even if I just limit myself to that criteria, you've got Chris Boucher at $4,800. You've got Larry Nance, as Nick already talked about. You've got JaVale McGee, who might be the best value player of the night if DeAndre Ayton doesn't play. Nick Claxton probably starts in place of LaMarcus Aldridge and could just play like 25 to 30 minutes in this contest, near the minimum. There is so much value. There's so much value, you can't even fit all the value into a single lineup. I do want to make a point, though, that because all this new value, quote unquote, has opened up in the last, really 10 minutes, but let's say 12 hours, that you might forget about like a Knicks team that is still without RJ Barrett because he is also in health and safety protocols. Derrick Rose, who's only $5,000 tonight, played 36 and a half minutes on Sunday in the Knicks' most recent game. So far this season, the Knicks are outscoring their opponents by 8.5 points per 100 possessions when Rose is on the court. They're getting outscored by almost 10 points per 100 possessions when he's off it. I would assume that Tom Thibodeau has that stat memorized and would want to play Derrick Rose 48 minutes a night if he could. As it stands, he's probably going to play him 35 to 38. He scored 37 DraftKings points in that game on Sunday. I think Rose probably sees a very similar role tonight, and he's easily going to outperform his 5K price tag.
All right, both the Knicks and the Blazers come into their games tonight on losing streaks. New York, losers of 3 in a row, are going to host Golden State. Portland, losers of 5 in a row, host the Suns. Chase or fade both of these teams' losing streaks continue, Nick W.
Man, I think I have to chase this. The Blazers maybe have a chance to knock off Phoenix with potentially no Ayton and no Devin Booker. Obviously, that levels the playing field to some degree, but at the end of the day, I almost trust this Suns infrastructure more than Portland's, which is kind of crazy to say given like the last decade of Suns basketball, but that's really how far they've come in this last season and a half, where you can take away, they're arguably their first or second best player and maybe their third best player, and you still feel pretty good about them getting a win on a lot of nights. They've just kind of become that well-oiled machine, at least in the regular season. And obviously the Knicks, are in a really tough spot here going up against Steph Curry on this night when it's a home game for the Knicks, but everything is going to be about Curry and this Warriors team coming into Madison Square Garden with a chance to break that record. So it's going to be kind of a weird game. Like, I don't know if they'll stop the game, when he breaks the record and acknowledge that. It's not going to have a normal feel to it. And I think at the end of the day, that probably benefits the road team in Golden State. And like Nick F said at the top, Curry has a history of playing well at the Garden. A lot of stars do. I think it's a pretty big night for Curry, a pretty big night for the Warriors. And I think both these losing streaks continue. Things kind of go from bad to worse for the New York Knicks, who it feels like they're just kind of throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks, but they just haven't really been able to recapture the feel of this team from last year, where it felt like everyone was having an above average season. Everybody knew their role. A lot of that has kind of come crashing back down to earth for the Knicks.
Garion, do you have to chase that both of these teams continue on their losing streaks?
I think so. Nick did a really good job covering most of it. So I'll just say that, like him, I agree that if there is a team that has a chance to make this a false statement, it's probably the Trailblazers, which is reflected in the spread. Like, this is not like a hot take or anything, but without Devin Booker in their last 5 games, the Suns actually have a negative net rating. They are 3-2, but they've been outscored by 0.2 points per 100 possessions. So they've not been great without Booker and with Ayton missing, which you would expect. That's a really hard ask of a team to win games with 2 of your 3 best players on the sidelines. So I would say Portland's got a shot, but in general, I just think these teams are going to keep winning.
All right, Nick F., what do we think?
I'm actually going to fade on this. I think that the Warriors are going to win. It's a no-brainer to me. I would take them minus the points. We all know like why. You guys have broke it down perfectly. And even though the Warriors are on the second leg of a road back-to-back, but when it comes to Suns Blazers, I got to go with Portland in this one with Damian Lillard being back in the mix as much as CJ McCollum is out, because Phoenix is also on the second leg of a back-to-back, a road back-to-back. And then when you look at the Suns too, like this season in back-to-backs, they're 1-2. I know their one win that came during their heater of midseason. And as much as I like the Suns, if there's no Ayton tonight, then I like them significantly less than this one. In one of their losses on the second leg of a back-to-back this season came against the Blazers too. I know it was much early in the year still, but I'm not going to discount that. And the Blazers are a much different team at home than they are on the road. I think they've won one game on the road, but they're like 10-5 at home too. So I'm going to go with the Blazers money line in that one.
All right, guys, time for Slate approved picks. That's your favorite DFS or sportsbook play on the entire 3-game slate. Nick F., where are you going?
Let's see. I was looking at the Nets one and thinking, okay, well, they're going to cover in this one. I really like this a lot because, you got Harden and Durant both healthy, but now Durant is questionable too. I think that getting a little bit of like early action on the Raptors game is the way to go, because if Durant is questionable, and we guys were talking before about, are they going to throw in the towel on this one and not play Durant, just go with Harden? I have no confidence that Harden is going to lead them solo past the Raptors. So I think back in the Raptors money line right now, just a little bit early, and then seeing what happens with Durant's status, keep tabs on that throughout the day, but that would be the way to go there.
Nick W., Slate approved.
Yeah, I like that call. I think, we saw what happens when it's just James Harden up against Houston last week. And I think Toronto is probably even more well-equipped to potentially take advantage of that situation. So that's a good call. I'll give some pub to some of the Steph Curry specials, though, that the DraftKings Sportsbook is offering tonight. You can get Steph to break the record in the first quarter at minus 110. He only needs 2 threes to do it. I mean, that's essentially what he's been averaging in the first quarter this season. So I think getting that at minus 110 is pretty decent value. Obviously, I think the Warriors make an effort, to get him going early and try to knock out that record as quickly as they can and get on with the game. So Steph Curry to break the record in the first quarter, minus 110 is my Slate approved bet of the day.
Garion, take us home.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that we all kind of agree on this one, but I do like the Raptors with the spread. I might even kind of like them on the money line right now. I'm a little worried if Durant does play, because you could just get like 45 minutes of Durant and Harden. They just have to max out their 2 best players, which is probably the optimal way for the Nets to be playing anyway. But when you look at the Raptors so far in December, they actually have the 4th best net rating in the NBA. They're playing some of their best basketball of the season. They're also 5-1 ATS, their last 6 second game of a doubleheader or a back-to-back. So they've been doing pretty well on these quote unquote tired, weird schedule nights. So yeah, I'll ride with the Raptors.